stakeholders, ministries, departments, agencies, who, as you know, were brought together by the Ministry of Education to allow us to be able to discuss difficulties that we were encountering in the school system with respect to both violence between students and teachers generally, and then also to be able to discuss the state of the school plan, because as you know, we are just about 5 to 6 weeks away from the end of the school term, and to that extent there has to be absolute certainty as to how we can make a difference to the quality of that plan. The agencies that were attending today and the ministers ranged from those responsible for people empowerment and elderly affairs, so that the social work and welfare agencies, Ministry of Youth Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Culture and Creative Economy, Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, Attorney General's Office, Commissioner of Police, Chief of Staff, and all of the individual departmental heads. From the unions, of course, we had all of the representative bodies, Barbados Union of Teachers, Association of Public Primary Schools, the Barbados Association of Public School Principals, BAPS and APS. APS being the primary and BAPS being the secondary. And of course the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, so that all of the major stakeholders have been present at LASC today from 10 o'clock this morning. It has been a long day, and we will not solve this country's problems within the system in one day. But we believe that we can make a start and we can have the kind of intervention. And I want to thank the Minister of Education and Vocational Training, Santia Bradshaw, for facilitating this meeting, along with all of our staff who came prepared, along with the unions, with a stock of data that has allowed us to take some of the decisions. The conversation, however, will continue. But the key decisions that we've taken build on, in fact, some earlier meetings that we had. And I'm sorry that the Attorney General is representing the government at a meeting in Washington, D.C., but were he here with us, he would tell you that we started this process when we met between the national security agencies and the police and the social and welfare agencies, including the Ministry of Education, some 6-7 weeks ago. And therefore, we don't start from ground zero today. We have agreed all, without exception, that there must be a national mission to save the 500 most vulnerable families across Barbados, from St. Lucie to St. Philip and Christchurch in the south, from the east to the west, parish by parish, and that there will be a framework determined by the social workers to allow us to identify who those most vulnerable of families are, that audit will also be complemented by information coming from the principals, as well as those who are already in the criminal justice system as young people, invariably below the age of majority, and that audit of those families will then allow us to intervene across every sectoral entity, be it the welfare department, be it the child care board, be it the Ministry of Education, be it the Ministry of Youth Affairs, be it the Ministry of Small Business, be it working with the stakeholders in the social partnership to help position them for training or jobs, but recognizing that this process is probably going to be embarked on initially over the next 18 months or so, but it will take at least 5 to 7 years to move a particular family from a point of dependence to a point of independence to a point of giving back to the society. In other words, removing the intergenerational aspects of poverty. Minister King said it better perhaps than anyone else in here today, that he worked at the government industrial school and that he worked there from 1983 to 91, and then he went back in 2012, and that when he went back in 2012, he was meeting the children of people whom he had dealt with in the late 80s, early 90s. This is the kind of intergenerational poverty that we are trying to break once and for all. Part of the difficulty of the last decade is that prior to 10 years ago, we could have said that poverty in Barbados was really not the absence of economic opportunity, but as a result of social difficulties and disabilities, abuse, afflictions, different things. But regrettably, to that has been added yet again absence of economic opportunity. We need to work to make people realize that poverty must not be a state of mind, even if it is a state of economic difficulties. And therefore, collectively, we believe we can work with the stakeholders in the community, the churches, the NGOs, the groups that have not been formed in recent years as they were before, to be able to help us in the effort. If we can save each family, then each family will save their own. And as a result, it is for us to be able to save these families to help us save the most at risk. There is no doubt that there has to be a reinforcement of the moral compass. People must know what is right and what is wrong. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And there's no two ways of mixing up what is right and what is wrong. Simply put as well, we have come and agreed, as have other heads of government in the region recently, following the WHO from years ago, that violence is a public health risk, a public health condition that we have to fight, and that we have a duty as a nation to condition violence out of the next generation. We cannot talk about wanting to be part of a Caribbean region that is a zone of peace and want to remove violence and war and afflictions that are related to that from across the region, but we're not removing it from our households, from our communities, from our public spaces. We must work together as a people to condition violence out of people's heads and to remind people that they have choice. And you have a choice as to how you respond to people, how you talk to people, what you do if you're angry, what you do if you're sad, what you do if you're disappointed. And in a very real sense, maturity as an adult comes in understanding that life is about choice and that choices have consequences. And we have very often to take time to reinforce this in our young people, in our children, because many of them, after the act, can be heard weeping and not realizing that had I not done this, I wouldn't be here and worrying and crying after. So the first major intervention, therefore, is in a total national approach to save the most vulnerable 500 families across the nation. How is it going to be done? It's not an arbitrary number. We've agreed that we will start with 30 families in each of the least populous parishes, from St. Lucie right back down to all except Christchurch, St. James, St. Philip, where we will do 50 each, and in St. Michael, where we will do 100 because of the populous nature. That brings us to roughly about 460, and then we felt that there would be others that might crop up over the course and conduct of the management of this affairs, and hence we round it off for our budgeting purposes at 500. The second thing that we have agreed today to do is that we have made available sums of money, not starting today, but starting at the end of the last fiscal year. Many of you would have heard me speak to it in the estimates, that we were deliberately putting aside for this financial year money to train young people in sports and cultural activity, to be able to help them find passion in things that they are not now doing, such that they can go into the communities and that they can look to form groups again. We want them to be able also, separate from the sports and cultural training, for us to be able to do so With respect to the Sea Cadets that we've agreed to give money to the Barbados Defence Force, 1.5 million there. The sports and cultural training is $2.5 million each to NCF and Sports Council, and also to the Prince's Trust and to other civic organizations like the Nature Fund Ranch that are making a significant difference in how they are training and keeping structured activity for young people who are not now involved in any kind of group activity. This is without prejudice to us working in the schools, and Santi will speak more about that, with other private sector agencies like Supreme Counseling, who will be more working in schools as opposed to the what I call structured after-school activity, that people must have passion beyond school, and that there must be something that keeps them engaged and involved. If not, they will find themselves going to other activities. What they say? That the devil finds work for who? Idle hands. The third thing, and most importantly, is that we will create another day facility for now, but ultimately to morph into a residential facility to allow us to be able to concentrate in a focused way on those young people who are most at risk and who for the moment are being disruptive influences in the schools which they attend. There's a very touching voice note that the minister shared with me with a young girl who can't be any more than 11 or 12, making a strong appeal to her and saying, Auntie Santi, I'm begging, there are those of us who really just want to learn in the classes, and we're not being given a chance, and the way in which some of these children are treating the teachers and disrupting the class cannot work. If this was just a normal situation, you might debate it. There can be no tolerance. I want to repeat myself. There can be no tolerance in this country for any child to believe that they are in a position to threaten or to attack any teacher or even their parents or any adult in this country. If we allow this to happen, we will be surrendering our country to lawlessness at a very, very wrong time, and to young people who will not come to appreciate that their behavior is unacceptable in every form. And to that extent, therefore, there will be a zero tolerance policy towards those who believe that they can threaten teachers in the system. The problem is that the system is not now structured to be able to work with and assist, because more often than not, just because it has happened doesn't make the child incapable of correction or incapable of being worked with again. But more often than not, you need to do so in a dedicated situation that allows you to unlock what is the source of this disrespect for authority, or what is the source of this anger, or that this reckless behavior that has caused the child to behave in this way. To that extent, the government will work immediately to create what was always intended to be an appropriately scaled residential facility to move and build upon the work of Edna Nichols, which I'm told the Edna Nichols Center is now stretched and therefore will require an additional review. But since the Edna Nichols Center, there have also been private sector institutions like Supreme Counseling that have come on board and that can work cooperatively. Because the one thing you don't want to do is to send a child on suspension and then they remain at home or in the community doing nothing. And the Edna Nichols Center was established to be able to take that child and to understand what was at the core of their indisciplined or deviant behavior, and can we get to the bottom of it. And if we can't, then we need this other facility that goes beyond the 3 weeks that the Edna Nichols Center may keep the child, with an additional expansion of only 1 3-week session. This entity that we will create has to be done in stages. The government has agreed that immediately within the next 2 weeks that we will pull together a group of persons, some of whom we have started to speak to today already, who will help us manage the process of helping to stabilize, understand, and educate these children who are most at risk and who are exhibiting these difficulties in behavior. On a parallel track, the Ministry of Education will settle the policy paper that will inform drafting instructions for the Attorney General such that we can turn this institution into a residential facility that will take two types of people. One, those children where the parents are requesting urgent intervention, in which case the consent of the parents is given, so you don't need a legislative framework. And those where the society, through the chief education officer, in the absence of the parents' consent, has come to the conclusion with the principal and other social workers and psychologists' reports that there is need for intervention. This is not a case of anybody with a conviction going to Dodds or the government industrial school. This is a case to try and prevent them from ever going to Dodds or government industrial school. But that, as an eminent social worker once said, it is easier to bend a boy than to break a man. And therefore we have to be able to put the legislative framework that allows the chief education officer to apply to the courts to act in loco parentis, in the place of the parents, to be able to have that child be subjected to some level of stay within a residential facility, be it 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, once the residential facility is built out. In the immediate day facility, before it becomes that, before we have the legislation, we've agreed to work with the Barbados Defense Force, who will make available immediately the space and facilities to supplement the work of the other day facility that the Ministry of Education currently runs, which is the New Horizons Academy. But that academy, I'm instructed, has in fact reached its limits, and therefore we are going to parallel the two types of facilities, one that will have clearly a far more rigorous discipline boot camp-like approach, and the other one being the continued efforts of the New Horizons Academy. This is a case at all stages of us bringing all hands on deck. And if there is a single message that must come out of today's meeting, is that not just in the public sector, not just in the labor movement and the NGOs, but across the entire country, from parents to grandparents to churches to cricket clubs, football clubs, sporting clubs, cultural organizations, all hands must be on deck. And all of us are required to give back if we are to take back. And what we are taking back is the future of our young people. By all evidence, it is not an astronomically large number of people. Indeed, it is probably less than a few hundred. The particular schools that we are talking about, the numbers provided by the principals, we are talking about less than 200 kids at the moment. But that does not mean that it does not require the most urgent and critical intervention. And I'm happy that we speak with one voice today across all sectors and from all perspectives. There is the additional commitment by the police that has been given and the BDF that they will increase the patrolling in the areas, and the evidence and the research done by the Ministry of Education has been comprehensive. And Sandy, I would like to thank your officers publicly and also the welfare agencies who have started some of the work since the early meeting, Cynthia. I want to thank everybody, the public officials, because we could not make quick action today on some of these things had there not actually been preliminary work being done for the last 6 to 8 weeks. And in the case of your official, Santia, I think theirs has been in the case of a couple of years. But one of the things that came out clearly from the research was that if you leave people unsupervised, if you leave children unsupervised, you are going to get these problems. More parents are working today than perhaps were working 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's a notion of what people would call in the old days latchkey children. Children who have their own keys, they go home, they're unsupervised. They're unsupervised in the bus stands. They're unsupervised as the time they leave school and they get into the buses. Santi will brief you as to the other posts that we've agreed to create at the request of her ministry. But what we will do, separate from what is done at the schools, and in addition to the work of the safety officers and the truant officers, the police and the BDF, who are doing a lot more joint patrolling across the country since the beginning of the year, will increase their patrols outside of the schools, along the routes that the children are passing, and in the bus terminals, because we will have a zero tolerance to indiscipline. Now, just because, and we made this point earlier today, that in many instances, even where the police become involved, we appeal to parents that charging is not the first option for young people. There's a juvenile liaison scheme. It is intended for us to work with young people and give them a chance. It is only where young people are either resistant to being talked to, or that the crime that has been committed is so serious that there is absolutely no way to avoid public charging, that we go there as a first option. But how many of us can think of people who along the way might have fallen or might have veered, and who a stern conversation or an intervention by others have made the difference to them being productive citizens or falling from the wayside? We must not at all lose the mercy that lies within our bosom and the milk of human kindness. Our children are not adults. And that is why they need guidance. And that is why they need mentorship. And that is why they need a firm hand. And that is why they need love. But tough love is often necessary to ensure that they do not fall off the straight and narrow path. The resources of the Ministry of Finance will be made available to be able to facilitate this core framework of actions, and my office has given its blessings to work across the multiple ministries, be it public service, be it finance, be it public works, be it the social ministries that I referred to just now, be it the Ministry of Environment, and Santi will speak to things that are too easy for us to resolve, and mercifully our ministry is taking the lead on it, like the Kowich and Trevor, and they'll talk about that separately. But these things are humbugs that ought not to be humbugs. And the real things that need our attention are the things to which I just spoke. As I said, we will make available financial resources for the school improvement and repairs program over the course of the summer. Part of the difficulty of doing repairs in the educational system is that you really only have finite periods to make it happen, because obviously you can't do heavy repairs on plant, on site, with children and teachers and other people functioning. But we will add an additional amount to the primary school summer program, so that the amount voted in the estimates of 3.5 will now go to 5.5 million. And roughly about 4.5 of that will be spent on the summer program, and the rest is spent for small repairs during the year, because a pipe may burst or something may happen that requires urgent repairs. So you always keep an amount to cover you for the rest of the year. And then in the secondary school system, we have an amount of another $7 million, 2 of which was given in supplementary for general schools, and another 5 this year, which makes 7, and then another $2 million for what we call the toilet replacement program. And we've determined that in the very most, there got to be some things that we have to have a zero tolerance to physically as well, and not just the violence. But we have to have a zero tolerance to some of the bathroom facilities in public spaces that we have, that we are requiring people to use, and they're using them at the time when the public health risk to them will be greatest. It cannot continue. It is not good enough, and we have to set new standards as to what is acceptable. You can't use a household toilet and hope that it can handle commercial pressure. It's not going to work. And therefore, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for the bathrooms clogging up. You're setting yourself up to put janitors to work in conditions that are unfair to them. And therefore, the government has determined, as I've felt long ago, and I'm happy to make it happen now, that we will invest this $2 million to start a phase of the replacement of all of the toilet facilities in secondary and primary schools over the next few years with industrial, commercial toilets that will allow us to be able, first, to be able to handle the pressure on a plant that has 600, 700, 800, 900 people, and secondly, that allows us to be able to allow the janitors to do their job more efficiently by tiling, and paving common areas and tiling within the bathroom facilities. Because what happens is that if you have grimy concrete that is uneven, the grime and all of the dirt stays in one place and the place starts to look nasty. The second major thing, and ironically when I saw the study today, I smiled because it talks about the design of facilities and the pathways and all of these other things that contribute to opportunities for violence. And we've determined that there are too many of some of our schools that are just simply too dark. And that darkness does not admit of an atmosphere to want to learn, and that we need ventilation and light in some of them. And if you know them well, they're these aluminum windows that, I mean, they're all the old World Bank schools. And the design, regrettably, was not really suited for the tropics, if you ask me. So we're going to need to replace out those windows and to create space and air and ventilation and light in those classrooms. And we're doing that in a phased way. We're starting, I think, with 3 schools. Parkinson Secondary, Grantley Adams, and Graydon Sealy to start with immediately this summer. And we will continue to do it as we can. We recognize that in addition to that, as I said, that the toilet program will span beyond the summer and not just in the summer, because that is a function of the delivery of the equipment that is necessary for us to do it. All in all, therefore, there is a commitment to spend equivalent of just about $4 million at the primary, 4 to 4.5 at the primary million, and at the secondary it is going to be another $9 million, 7 generally, and then $2 million in the toilet replacement program. So 11 million over the summer, and the other 2 million on a parallel track from the summer onwards on the toilet replacement program. These are the broad strategic interventions that we are going to take to help both from the issue of violence as well as the quality of the school plan that is impairing the ability for students to learn and teachers to teach. And we believe that the persons, and let us also be clear that the ancillary staff are a critical component of children developing the social and emotional development that they need in order to be able to function. So we're not only focusing on teachers, but we're going to work with the ancillary staff. We recognize as well that in many instances, people are not told what is expected of them, both on the school plan and off, and therefore we want to work with them so that everybody is on the same page. And I'm confident that the institutions that are here will work with us to have their members put persons on the same page so that each school has a mission and each person in that school understands what their purpose and what their mission is so that we can get there. Will we have perfection? Probably not. But what we will have is a focused approach to being able, 1, to reduce the level of violence, and 2, to be able to improve the numbers seeking to learn within our school system. We've also agreed that we need to take control of how our schools look, and we need to start to landscape. It should not only be international schools that have beautiful grounds and nice trees and shade and fences that are landscaped rather than being link fences that are mashed up within a matter of weeks at great cost. I've never seen anybody run through Bougainvillea or Sweet Lime yet, and Bougainvillea thrives in the dry season to make it more encouraging for us to want to plant. And I've therefore asked the NCC to work with the Ministry of Education, but I'm conscious that the NCC and the Ministry of Education alone will not help, and therefore I'd like them to reach out also to all goodwill, people of goodwill, as well as companies of goodwill, to help us adopt schools in our communities and to want to landscape them. And I'd like simply to say two things. I want to talk directly to the parents. Our children are our blessings, and we have a responsibility to take care of them. You have to work with the teachers in the system, and we have to work together, families, schools, church, communities, because too many of our young people do not feel that they are loved or that they are being valued or that they are being supported. It is our responsibility to give them that, but also to teach them the most basic of lessons, that life is about choice. We choose every step that we make and every statement that we make, every word that we use, and everything that we choose has a consequence. If we work together to reinforce this in our children, we will win the battle. And to the children, I want to say to the children of this nation that know that you are blessed to be being brought up in a country that values you and that loves you. Yesterday I met with the doctors of this country, and we reflected that we spend between education and health almost $100,000 for every child that is born and gets to 18 years old in this country. There are very few other countries in the world that makes this kind of investment in its children. We love you, but loving you at the level of the country sometimes may feel to you that you're not feeling the love in your home or in your community. And sometimes if you're not feeling it, you have to find somebody to talk to. And as Santia said, talk it out. If you talk it out, trust me, there is no battle that you cannot overcome. But what we can't have is you feeling alone and then taking things into your own hands and lashing out at everybody. If somebody is bullying you, if somebody is unfair in you, find an adult to talk to about it. But what we can't have is you walking this journey of life alone, feeling unloved. And this country has shown it at a collective level. It is the rest of us now, your parents, your aunts, your godmother, your godfather, your uncles, to be able to reach out to you and let you know that all of us will always feel sad. All of us at some point will feel angry. All of us at some point will feel disappointed. But you don't let those things cause you to do the wrong thing or things that you will regret forever. So I hope that this is not a case of me alone talking, but I'm asking the rest of this country. We have a duty to lift up our children and to lift them up in a way that touches their hearts.